what are we talking about today, Lisa?
Well, I am so excited today to talk with Niti about trying to let go of your fears and to take off the mask and be your real self. So, Niti, can you talk a little bit about who you are and why this is a topic you're passionate about?
I am a lawyer, as I've said before, and I've been practicing for around about 18, nearly 19 years now. So I started in private practice and then I moved in-house about 9 years ago. And this topic is something I'm really passionate about because I think it's something that a lot of lawyers face. We grow up, I think, as high achievers, really having this deep-rooted sense of, fearing failure and needing to get perfect marks, needing to do everything perfectly. I remember back in school coming home sometimes with marks from, exams or tests and saying to my dad, I got 98% and being really excited. My dad turning around to me and saying, that's really great, but where's the extra 2%? Or how did other people do? And I think this is the sort of attitude that I think we really face as students, and then as legal students, and then in the legal profession. And I think over time it just gets worse.
So where in your career, so if you started in law practice, when did you feel like there was a shift from being afraid to not being afraid of making mistakes, or are you still worried about making mistakes?
I think to some extent, I think I will always have a little bit of that worry. But I think over the years, particularly as I moved in-house, it's become somewhat easier to step up and say, do you know what? I don't need to get things perfectly right. I can make mistakes. I can acknowledge my mistakes. It's okay. And I think you only learn that generally a little bit later, I think, in your career is my experience. I mean, I'm hoping that perhaps, the younger generation starts to learn it earlier. I mean, we are now and have been for a little bit talking a lot more about the dangers of perfectionism and the importance of embracing failure. But I think talking about embracing failure and actually doing it are two very different things.
So with respect to your current position, do you feel like you were able to let go of the need to be perfect because of going in-house, or do you think it's more the result of age and maturity?
I think it's a mix of both. Look, I think when I first joined in-house practice, I don't think I was any different to how I was in private practice. I still had this deep-rooted fear of failing and needing to be, perfect, needing my work to be perfect as well. Over time, I think the perfectionism element, I think, was the first thing to drop, because you do realize, I think, being in-house, that you can't spend 10 hours perfecting a piece of work. It's almost like there's a curve, and at some point in time, perfectionism actually reduces the effectiveness of your work, because in perfecting one thing, you're perhaps leaving another 5 things to the side that you could be getting onto instead. And that additional incremental bit of perfectionism isn't really going to materially improve your work product. So I think the in-house job definitely taught me how to get over perfectionism. I think the fear of failure and that being vulnerable aspect took me a lot longer to acquire.
I sometimes wonder if this is uniquely legal phenomenon. Is it just us? Or is it like is it like human, or is it lawyer? Any thoughts? And that question actually to both of you, Lisa and Niti. I'm just kind of curious. We both have such diverse experiences. So I'm curious if this is like human and equal opportunity, or is it somehow not so equal opportunity?
I think it's not uniquely a legal profession issue. I think it's heightened in professions like ours and other professions which are full of high achievers, simply because of the way that we have I guess, been brought up and the way we've lived our life until then. So I think it's heightened in the legal profession, but I don't think it's an issue that's unique to the legal profession. I think, even if you look at the agile landscape and this whole idea that you need to embrace failure and, you have MVPs and you basically keep pivoting, etc. It's not a concept that is easy for people to necessarily grasp or get used to because it is so foreign to us. So that's my view. I don't know, Lisa, what you think.
Yeah. And you know what I was thinking? So I've always been, I guess, tangentially in the legal field. But I do think that it is something that crosses professions. But I really think to some extent it's heightened. And it's not only with people who are, type A personalities in the legal profession, but I also think that no matter what area you go in, as you rise in the ranks and you become more and more responsible, you have more and more pressure on yourself to succeed and to deliver. So to some extent, I think it is across professions, and I think it only gets heightened as you move up in your career and as you get more and more responsibility.
I think it is somewhat equal opportunities. Think that there's a self-selection going on for those of us who sort of extra perfect striving, that we tend to end up in law school a little bit more often.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, Niti, when you were in private practice, do you think that the need to be perfect was something that you placed on yourself, or did you feel pressure from those people for whom you worked to be perfect?
I think it was a lot of the latter, to be honest. I mean, there was definitely some of, the self-imposed pressure as well. I think that definitely is there when you've grown up with it your whole life. But I think in law firms, I think the one thing I do remember from early days is the fact that every email needed to be checked. And sometimes you'd give an email to a partner and they would change one word. And you would look at it and go, what was the point of this change? Because it's not really, it's not amended it's substantially done nothing to the email. But, you had this everyone had partners really, wanted to look at every single thing. And the fact that you couldn't even send an email out without someone looking over your shoulder at it, to me, that element of control, as you put it, Olga, I think is almost what drives more and more and more this belief that you need to be perfect in your work product. Every I needs to be dotted, every T needs to be crossed. You can't have a typo. God, if you have a typo in your work, it's the end of the world. That's kind of the way I think, private practice generally, at least when I was going through it, you were taught to work.
Yeah, and I really do. I think the reason I love in-house as much as I do is because I don't have that managing partner or that supervising attorney that is scrutinizing things to that level. And what's funny is now that I'm in-house, they want you to produce. They want you to produce quicker. And I get the sense more that they're impatient with that desire to be perfect and they just want to move on and go forward. So I've actually had to fight with myself to not take as much time in working on a project because I've got, my internal clients that want product moved quicker.
It is different. And I think it can be a real struggle with self sometimes because people are impatient. The business is impatient. They want their responses and they wanted it yesterday. So, you need to learn, I think, to almost, just work out where the risk possibly lies and where your time is best spent. And if your time is best spent on 2 things versus 10 things, then you focus in on those 2 things. And if those, 8 or 10 other things are not perfect, then you let them be because you need to get the work done and you need to keep moving fast. So I completely agree with you, Lisa. I think it's just very different.
And the one thing I'd like to shift a little bit here because we're sitting here and we're talking about being perfect in the workplace. But, you know, Niti, I can't think of you without thinking of perfectionism in your personal life. Did you find it difficult to lay yourself out there bare like you do every day?
Yeah, I did. Very much so. I mean, I will quite openly now share that I never used to share anything at all, to the point where I think early on in my relationship with my now husband, he actually said to me, "Can you please open up more? Because I'm tired of asking you how you feel all the time." So that was me. And that was me in my personal life and in my professional life. So I very much put on this mask and this persona, and I went to work with this persona, and I tried to leave my personal life at home. And it was only really, I think, a few years ago when I did suffer from some pregnancy losses and the resulting mental health issues that went along with them, and that I finally broke down, that I realized, do you know what? There's so much power in talking about the stuff that isn't perfect in your life. And actually by talking about it, you help yourself heal. And for me, it was a real turning point, because until that point in time, you know, it was just all buried within. And that was not just, you know, workplace stuff, but it was also all my personal stuff, all the things that potentially had impacted me as I grew up were all hidden and buried deep within. And it really took that moment for me to go, okay, it's okay. I can share. I've been forced to share in this moment, but I can share, and actually sharing is helping me. And perhaps then by sharing, helping me over time, I think I got to a point of saying my sharing can potentially help other people. And so that's where my journey on LinkedIn began. And I think even a year and a half ago, there's no way I would have talked about half the things I talk about now. But, you know, I think you learn and you grow as you keep going.
I know, as watching you post over the last year and a half, I've seen an incredible amount of development in your posts. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about you. Do you have anybody in your personal life or at work seeing it and kind of questioning you in terms of why you're willing to let yourself be out there like that?
Look, I think people will always question it. I don't know that anyone's come straight out and questioned me directly, but I'm sure there are people out there who go, "What are you doing? And why are you sharing all this stuff so publicly? And this is you know, as people say quite often, a professional platform. And, you know, you can't be sharing personal stuff on LinkedIn and with the world." But I don't know. I actually find a lot of comfort in sharing on LinkedIn. I find it somehow it feels incredibly safe to share. Yes, you get trolls and all the rest of it, but it's still, I don't know, for some reason it still feels fairly safe. And I love the fact that when I share things, I sometimes get messages back from people, and they may not be public comments, they may be private DMs saying, you know, "Thank you so much for sharing what you shared. This is my story." And then they'll share back with me their story. And sometimes, and I've seen this in the recent few weeks even, people will say, you know, "I read your post and I have felt that, you know, I can now share myself." And they've gone on to share their own personal story. It might not be on social media. It might be with friends or family or whoever, but that to me is the beauty of being able to share vulnerably. It's that you give other people permission and space to be vulnerable as well.
Yeah, and I know that one of the things I've seen you talk a lot about, you seem to be passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've seen a lot of conversations that have started as a result of some of your posts. You know, is there some intentionality to those posts, or are you trying to reach out and try to maybe, I don't know, change people's minds, or to try and be more open about the conversation in order for maybe the work environment to change?
I think it's a mix of those things. So I think firstly, it's important for me, I believe, to talk about these things because I am very passionate about them. And, not just at the workplace, in parenting situations as well. I believe it's important to talk to my children about these issues. And I don't know that I'm necessarily aiming at changing people's minds because, people have their opinions and they're not going to change them. And I saw this a couple of days ago, when I posted something about the use of personal pronouns. And, people, the trolls came out to play and there was no changing anyone's minds, and you're not going to change someone's mind. But what you can perhaps do, I think, is bring awareness to the issues that people do face. So, for example, when I talk about things to do with color and color of your skin and how that might impact a person, or how lack of representation might impact that person, or, and how it's impacted me in the past, not seeing myself represented in TV or entertainment or in whatever it is. That for me is about bringing awareness to the issue, and it's about helping other people understand what someone else's perspective looks like. And I think that's half the journey with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, is for people to listen and for people to appreciate another person's perspective. Problem solving and all the rest of that comes afterwards. First, you have to understand where people are at.
Yeah, I think you do a really good job with that. And I have read some of your posts and some of the exchanges that you've had with people. And I do see, it's gotten me to think. And I look at it more of like education. And not necessarily, I think you're right. You don't change people's minds, but if you share a perspective with other people, the one thing I like about LinkedIn is there are people who are willing to self-examine their own beliefs after hearing your perspective, and then maybe shift because they hadn't considered the issue from your perspective before. And I think that is wonderful. And I do think that is a benefit of what I see you doing.
100%. I think that's right. I do think it's about those people who perhaps don't have vehement views, to an extreme. And if you can reach those people and help them see things a little bit differently, then I think that's fantastic. And likewise, I would say I don't know every aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've had people who have written posts, for example, on neurodiversity. And for me, neurodiversity is something I'm still learning about, and I'm still, scraping the surface of what that means for people and what that looks like for people. And so for me, equally, it's important for me when I read other people's stories to try and understand where they're coming from and what their perspective looks like. And that sometimes, is amazing because it informs me, it educates me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the same experience. Olga mentioned the fact that, you're in Australia. She and I are both in the United States, but we are in very different parts of the world. So with the people that you've engaged with on LinkedIn, do you have a specific geographic location, or do you find yourself engaging with lots of people from all over the world?
Really all over the world, I think. I don't think it's been limited to any geography at all. I actually think it's fantastic that you can connect with people from all over the world, because some issues are not that different in different places of the world, and other issues are very different in different places of the world. And I think you gain a lot of perspective from hearing what people have to say, regardless of where they're based. Now, obviously, being in Melbourne, it's great when I connect with people from Melbourne, because now that we're coming out of lockdown, hopefully I can actually meet these people. And I have met a few people here and there that I've met on LinkedIn over the last year and a bit. But I think the global aspect of the platform is fantastic.
I'm curious. This is really interesting and kind of observation. The gift of COVID is, of course, all this global conversation and finding how much in common and we have. and this conversation moving from perfectionism to sort of letting go. And what I find is that letting go means different things to different people. What does let go, I guess, actually mean to both of you?
Yeah. Lisa, do you want to go first?
No, I was going to say I'm more interested in I'm honest with you, Niti. There's times when you have bared your soul, and I sit there and go, "Woo!" I don't know that I could say that, and I'm in awe in how much you share.
Yeah, I don't know. Letting go for me means, I don't know, it can be different for different people. I think through COVID, I think one of the things that has been brilliant has been the letting go of the persona that we wear to work. And so I think having this window into people's lives even, and seeing them be more open and upfront about their family or what's going on in their personal life, I think that's an element of letting go. And I think that's something we've really seen. And it'll be interesting to see, I think, particularly given some of what's happening in the States with, law firms being told that they need to have their staff back at the office and things like that. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out and whether people go back into their professional box, or whether this letting go that we've experienced over this year and a half continues through that. And I don't know what your perspectives are on that, being in the States. Are you seeing that things are going back to the way they used to be, or have people fundamentally changed?
I don't know about you, Olga, but it really that's a tough question. I think it depends on what you're looking at. From what I've seen, it felt like people were giving lip service to change during the pandemic and during lockdown. But I do feel like there are some people, more I think in private practice than in-house, that I've seen, that seem to be kind of trying to walk it back right now. And I think that the more they try and walk it back, the more we're going to see people leaving jobs, because we've figured out that there is a way to do law differently. And it feels like there are some people who have been used to doing it in a certain way in the past, and they are eagerly trying to recapture what was before we went into the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask what let it go means to you, because, as a CEO, I live in this wonderful bubble, at least to some extent, right? There's a benefit of being one, is that you can kind of set rules, right? And, and so I have, in my company, I show up publicly and talk about things, and that's kind of the norm. We sort of created this bubble where I am. I see people like Niti, show up fully, and other people show up fully the way they show up fully, and other people not show up fully at all. Yeah. Sometimes it's a personal choice, and sometimes it's a choice imposed by others. So it's a little hard to judge from my bubble. So I think showing up fully means different things to different people. Not everyone likes to reveal everything, or even many things, or even some things about themselves. So it may mean different things to different people. I think I think at the end it comes down to a choice. Are you free to choose? Right? I don't think there is a right or wrong way to do it. It is that, are you showing up the way you want to show up? Whatever that means to you, authentically, not authentically, partially, fully, can you do that if you choose? Do you have a will, to do that? Do you have an ability without suffering the consequences? And that I'm not convinced people have that freedom. I don't think that everyone has that freedom.
And I do think, it's about judgment too. And so I think the difference between what Niti does on LinkedIn, for example, and how she shows up versus the way I show up, I do feel like I'm authentically me, but I will be honest, there are subjects that I specifically avoid talking about, or I won't engage in posts that are on certain subjects that I know are controversial, because I'm not comfortable being controversial in public. So, I think for me, showing up is, and where I draw the line is, I really avoid too much controversy. And because it is a professional platform, I also do keep in the back of my mind that people do know where I work. And I do feel to some extent like I have to be careful because I don't want to shine a negative light on my employer, because my employer, whether I like it or not, is connected to me on this platform.
It's a good point. And I think, you go, Olga.
I was going to ask you, you work for a sizable company. So have you thought about, you must have thought about it. I don't know if you had any conversations internally, but you must have thought about it at least, right?
Oh, yeah. And look, and I think occasionally there is noise, and I hear noise about, why is she so active on LinkedIn, and what is she doing, and what is this all about, and so on and so forth. I mean, for me, I think, letting go and vulnerability doesn't need to be about what you do on a social media platform. I think it's far more important in some ways that you're doing it in your day-to-day life. So, the ability, I think, in workplaces to be able to stand up and say, I made a mistake and I got this wrong and I'm not perfect and I will get things wrong. And so, that for me is far more important in some ways than whether or not you show up on social media, because whether or not you show up on social media is slightly different. I mean, that's about building your personal brand. It's about the work that perhaps you do outside of the platform as well. So for me, talking about pregnancy loss has led me down a path of actually becoming very active in this space and working with organizations in this space. Similarly, in the diversity space, I now work with some organizations outside of, work and outside of everything else, and help them on a pro bono basis from time to time. So, for me, it's what are you actually doing in your workplace? How are you showing up? So through the pandemic, are you, because people have been suffering so much, are you able to stand up and talk about how you're feeling yourself and how you have experienced the pandemic? And to me, I think those are the things that we need more of in the legal profession, because I think if you can do that, then the people who you're leading will feel that sense of trust and psychological safety in being able to share where they are themselves. And that doesn't mean, I'm going through a divorce. That doesn't mean I'm going through depression. It doesn't mean any of those things. It might be as simple as being able to say, I'm not okay today, and, there's some stuff going on. I need to take some time out. So I think for me, that's I think for letting go for me is more about that part of it. How much you let go is a personal choice.
I love that. And that's such a great point, because it's not just about like on social media talking about it, but it is about, talking the talk and walking the walk at work. So, I think talking about making mistakes when you're a leader in the workplace, I think that it really helps when there are more junior people on your team, and they see that if you as the leader are willing to admit when you're wrong and when a mistake has been had, it makes it a lot easier for them to be able to come forward and say, you know what, I made a mistake. And I also think that when you show vulnerabilities and strengths and weaknesses, it brings teams together because, it's not the leader shouldering the full burden, the full responsibility on their shoulders. No one person can do that. And by the leader showing some vulnerability and the, sometimes making a mistake, I think they're modeling what needs to happen and for their team members. And it's almost like it's giving permission to the other people on your team to be able to be vulnerable, make mistakes, and sometimes not always be perfect.
I do find though that, and because I've been showing up in LinkedIn and various other platforms, for over a decade now, and had conversations with many lawyers about them showing up. I do think, I think a big chunk of it is sort of, leading by example. But I also find that more than other parts of the population, there is sort of overthinking about what it means to like. For example, I did certain columns and then I stopped, and people would say, "Why are you not doing it anymore?" And I would say, "I didn't know you were my reader. You never liked, you never commented. Heck, you never even written me a private, message. I had no idea. Thank you for reading, but for now a couple of years, I never knew. Thank you for letting me know. I thought I have no readers." And it was explained to me more than once that some people think when they like, they endorse.
Yes.
And I kind of like do the same as if I understand, but I don't. I don't understand how an act of liking or commenting means you endorse. I really struggle. I think we see a little bit less of that. I am really thrilled that I even able to see in-house lawyers. In-house lawyers before were completely absent from social media. Now there's a few brave souls. Yay, high five to all.
Yay.
all brave souls out there. High five. You have my support. But there is this thing of, if I do anything, it means I endorse, and which is a very strong statement of agreement. So any thoughts about that?
Yeah,
I absolutely see that.
You go, Lisa.
Yeah, I was going to say, I absolutely see that. And you look at all the statistics they have about LinkedIn and how only 1% of those people on the platform and who are viewing the content actually create content. There's a lot of people, lurkers, people who watch and don't engage.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it was interesting. I had someone who wasn't actually a lawyer, but working in a professional services capacity as well, ages ago. And he would, instead of liking or commenting on my posts, if he saw something he liked, he would send me a message responding to my post in a message. And I found it really strange. I was like, "Why are you messaging me? You could just comment on my post." And he said, "Oh, no. But, I can't do that because it's a professional platform and I can't comment. But I am really interested by what you have to say, and here are my thoughts, and let me share now." And I was like, it's strange. I'm not talking about, things that are really controversial in, from a workplace context, or things that are going to then damage your reputation. But people do have this, I think, reluctance to comment and to get involved in the content on LinkedIn. And I think there is this barrier where people worry a lot about what other people will think. And I think this is very common in the legal profession. I think it is also there in many other professions as well. I'm glad that it's starting to change, but
no, I mean, like, if I ask sometimes people for like recommendations or resources, I'll get a lot of comments, but I also get a lot of, "Hey, Olga, check this out, check that," and it's like nothing. It's like available in public, nothing, totally unusual, right? Just a great resource. And I'm like, why didn't you post any comment? Everyone else could benefit. After all, I actually kind of asked publicly for the benefits of everyone. And I get this kind of range of responses. It means I endorse. I'm like, well, I asked the question, so you endorse me asking a question. Great. That's a very neutral thing to endorse if you have to endorse anything. Or, sometimes people say, "Well, I've written it, so I feel uncomfortable to self-promote." I'm like, well, did you think it would be helpful for anyone? It's not self-promotion if it's not useful. It is useful, so you wrote it for that reason. So it's really interesting how, sometimes social media actually does bring up sort of the baggage or preconceived notions that we have. We show up with all of that.
Yeah, and self-promotion is a big one, right? And I think it's a big issue for a lot of people, particularly women, I think, and women in the legal profession, I think, suffer from this. But, I think there is this real fear that, if I put myself out there in this way, I'm kind of talking myself up, or whatever else. But and it plays out in real life as well. People then don't self-promote in real life either. And none of that helps a person, and this is what I think, people get this wrong. There are ways to show up in social media, in workplaces, and to promote yourself without coming across as arrogant or, trying to step on other people's toes or all of those sort of things. I think you can definitely do it. And I think it's just the how that people sometimes, I think, don't know.
So I guess, to follow on this line of self-promotion, so when you post and you want to share something that is, good news, how were you able, Niti, to get over the feeling that somehow it would be perceived as being self-promotion, and there would be people out there that would somehow think you shouldn't be doing that?
I think it's about the language that you use. I think you can be humble in the way that you post things about your own professional achievements, right? So I post articles that I've written. I've been writing a bit for the Association of Corporate Counsel recently. So I post them as and when they get published, right? But the way I do it is by anchoring it to a story or thinking about how can what I am posting help someone else? So what is the angle for the reader? So this is not just all about me saying, yay to me, I've written an article, read the article, it's fantastic. But here's the content, here's how this can help you. And I think it's the same when you talk about your professional accolades, right? It's what's in it for the reader. And I think if you think about it from that perspective, I think it changes the way you write your content.
And I think you're right about that, and you do an excellent job at that. So it's more about, it's not about me, and it's about me giving you something that you can use. That's a great point.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Lisa, what are your thoughts when you share about,
Yeah, I had to really work at that, because I didn't want people to think that I was trying to, brag. But I think, honestly, I think I do the same thing that Niti does. It's about I'm sharing this to help you to not have to go through what I went through. So it's about giving. And when you frame it as giving, then I think somehow that is better. And I was thinking about, and I actually read an article about this, and I posted about it. So the This Little Girl Is Me campaign, I read an article from somebody who said the reason it was so successful was because women felt like they were not bragging about themselves, but they were giving something to others to help motivate and inspire others. So I think it goes right to your point, Niti. And I think that, there are studies that show that women feel most comfortable doing it in that way.
I get, it's funny because I went from framing to sort of even stop thinking about it. And I think for me, what helped is that, I get a lot of private comments where people would say something along the line, I've been watching you do your thing, and that has been inspiring. Yeah. You actually sharing that journey, and you doing this and that, and you just doing it. Like that alone, like no tips is unnecessary. Just you being you gives me permission to be me. And I think to me that was very powerful. I think that's what ultimately allowed me to stop sort of thinking, do I share about this? Is this like a humble brag? Is it me self-promoting? But, there are sort of things that I do. Like there are, I write 2 articles a week, and that's just a fact, and me sharing about it. Is it self-promotion? Yeah, I guess. But it's also me,
Yeah.
And it's also true. I was a general counsel, right? And is it self-promotion? Maybe, but it's also true. It's a fact. It's a wonderful fact. And yes, I'm proud of it. And yes, I celebrate it. And but I think people seeing you go through stages of life, and with courage and sharing it inspires and gives them permission to do the same. And I think once I realized that, I think I stopped worrying about how I frame facts, because facts are facts. They speak for themselves. They're true.
Yep. I agree. And I think as you do it more and more and more, I think you get more and more comfortable with it. You get better at it as well. So if I look back at things that I might have written, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years ago, when I was on here very sporadically, it's very different to the way I write now, because I've worked out over time, okay, there's a way I can position this, and this is how I can talk about this. And I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
Niti, Lisa, why don't you sort of maybe give one or two things that you want folks to think about as they kind of think about showing up fully, letting go, being themselves, and/or social media? I know I just asked 500 questions all in one, no pressure at all to do a fantastic answer in less than a minute. So go.
Well, I'll go real quick, and then Niti, you have all of the end. So I would just say that the takeaway here is stop worrying about judgment. You be you, and do what makes you feel comfortable.
No, I would say just, in the workplace, just think about how you can show up in a way that allows others to show up as themselves. So, what can you do to create that space that facilitates authenticity in other people and vulnerability in other people?
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Niti. This was a wonderful discussion, dream come true. I love being in your company. And Lisa, thank you for co-hosting, and that's an understatement, for leading this conversation. Niti, thank you for being a wonderful guest. I've learned so much from both of you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we are at the end of our show. I'm really grateful for this discussion. I wanted to talk to both Niti and Lisa for a long, long time. Talking to both of them has been sort of a dream come true, and I'm really excited about it. Both of them have been recommended by many of you to join the conversation. So I'm going to invite you to consider making nomination of other in-house lawyers who can join me on the show to share about their personal career and/or social aspirations and work. Because as we know, in-house lawyers, as any lawyer and any human, is well-rounded and do quite a lot of things. So definitely share your nominations and let me know. And if you want to be a co-host, now you know that is totally possible. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.